Testing, testing.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you all for coming today for this event by Farzana Bai Karawali on mental health around exams. She'll be covering this topic through a holistic approach, covering the neuroscience around or of exams. I'll just pass the floor to her, and we hope this session is very interactive. Even there are few of us, we believe that you'll be able to ask more questions and make this an interactive session, inshallah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Come on guys, we only started. Big salawat please. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Okay, so I'm going to introduce myself a bit later. First I want to check if you're all awake. So I'm going to ask you, why do you think exams can have an effect on your mental health? Not all at once. Clearly I'm here for a reason, right? So there's definitely an issue. Have we got the mic? Should I? Stress, okay. Why else do you think it would have an impact on your mental health? What exactly is it about the exams that... Go for it. Sorry? Pressure. From family as well, right? Family pressure, pressure from school. What other pressure could you be having? Achievement, yeah. Is that your own pressure on yourself? You think so, yeah? Okay. Any other reasons why mental health will be affected by your exams? What happens in terms of how do you feel when your exams come close? Are you happy, excited? Sorry? Anxious, yes, yes. There's one particular word I'm looking for, begins with F. Fear, yeah, fearful. Why would you be fearful when it comes to exams? What's the worry? It's working. What's the worry? That you have to perform. And what if you don't? Sorry? Well, that is the big question, isn't it? What if you don't perform? Has that crossed anyone's mind? No? You guys don't think that far ahead, right? So you're not worried about exams. I can see some smiles, so I'm guessing that is the case, yeah? That you're worried, what if I don't perform?
Yeah, 100%. And like the consequences of not being able to perform. So
Yeah, the consequences.
Kicked out after 3 years of uni.
Yes, yes. After all that effort, what is going to happen? So it's more about the future, isn't it? It's not about the now. You're not worried about the now and that the exam is tomorrow and I'll just finish the exam and that'll be it. The fear is for the future, right? It's always about the future. And really, do we know our future? Do you guys know what you want to do?
Kind of, yeah.
You do.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us what you want to do?
Well, I mean, I'm at dental school. I want to be a dentist.
Oh, wow. You're going to have to work hard for that, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
So I think there is like a plan, and they're always surprising.
There's a plan. There's a plan, right? And you make that plan yourself. You tell the family, you tell the friends. Everyone knows there's an expectation. So you've got to make it, right? You really got to work hard. So it's not just about you. It's about everyone, isn't it? Yeah? So are you guys more fearful of the exam or are you fearful of after the exam? After the exam. That's worse, right, than the actual exam. Am I right? Yeah? I can just see from the smiles that I'm right, yeah? Perfect, okay. So what I want you to think about here is, what is your niyyah before studying? Before you study for your exams, what is your intention? Because you're saying it's about the future, right? So what's your intention? Has anyone actually thought of a niyyah? I mean, at the end of the day, we're studying for us, but the intention should be for the sake of Allah, right? Yeah, am I right? So anyone thought, even right now, anyone thought of a niyyah right now for their studies? No? And the reason why I'm saying that, go on, go for it, sorry. Yeah, definitely. And also, like the job that you want to do, for example, it can help people, right? It can make a change to the world, and that's really what our niyyah needs to be, right? So if we're leaving in Allah's hands, really, with a good niyyah to say that I want to become an engineer, I want to become a dentist, I want to set up a business, whatever it may be, there's a level of contribution to society, right? So even me as a social worker, the one key word we use in terms of the people that we help is to get them to a better position where they can contribute to society, whether they're working in a shop as a mechanic or even a cleaner job. It doesn't matter. It's a contribution to society, right? So in that sense, that can improve our niyyah. And if we have a clean niyyah, already the pressure's taken off us, because who are we giving it to? Who's all this for? For the sake of Allah. Does that make sense? So let's try and change the way we think about exams to some extent and actually bring Allah in the picture. We say that Allah should be in everything that we do, right? We should always put him in the picture. But sometimes we forget. We sometimes forget that, what we're here for is to make a change to society before we die, to leave our mark in this world. So hopefully that will take a bit of pressure off you in terms of you're giving it to Allah and you're asking him to help you take this forward. Does that make sense? Yeah? So if you ever feel really low and you feel, what am I going to do? Well, you hand it back to Allah and then you don't have to take as much stress. Okay? So that's one avenue. Okay. So I'm going to ask you another question now. So when you go to school, since young till now, have you gone to school to memorize or have you gone to school to learn? To learn. Has anyone gone to school to memorize? Could be, but do you remember the memorization from when you were 7 years old? But do you remember the learning from when you were 7 years old? Yeah, so you're more likely to remember the learning from 7 years old, but not remember the memorization. Am I right? So what do we do when we're trying to prepare for our exams? What do we end up doing? Do we give it time and learn, or do we squeeze it in and memorize? Squeeze it in and memorize, yeah. So you can see now that actually some of the ways that we try to study actually causes more stress for us, because memorization doesn't last very long. It only lasts a couple of weeks, a couple of months if you're lucky. For me it would be a couple of days and it's gone. So I wouldn't be able to sit in an exam after memorizing. Yeah, so that's another thing. And now we've already talked about the future. So I think it's about time I introduced myself. Okay, so the reason why I asked you these questions is because my name is Frizana, okay, and by profession I'm a social worker. I'm a learning disabilities nurse. I'm also a therapeutic life coach. I've set up some voluntary services. I do therapies such as CBT, DBT, NLP, and some other therapies. I also run a training business, so I'm training the local council and just private training for charities. So I do quite a bit. But if I told you that I'm dyslexic and I failed every exam, what would you say? So I sat and revised, and I revised, and I revised, and nothing ever entered my head. And I failed every exam. Until I decided to do beauty therapy. So I'm a beauty therapist as well. So I learnt anatomy physiology as part of my beauty therapy and massage. And when I learnt that, that gave me the credits to get into university. Go for it.
Also a therapeutic life coach.
So a therapeutic life coach is somebody that supports people in a therapeutic way using the therapies that I said to kind of help them to get back into whatever state they're in, to come out of that state and move forward in life. So whether that's, mental health issues, or whether that's bereavement, or whatever it may be, family issues, yeah? So, what was I saying? It was my anatomy physiology diploma that got me actually into university. But I had failed my GCSEs, I failed my A-levels, everything. So I've been here. I know exactly how you feel, and I knew that I would fail, and I didn't know what to do with myself. So I just want to give you hope that you can get somewhere, because I've actually managed to, alhamdulillah, get somewhere. And for me, the key is the niyyah, the intention. What are you doing it for? Even if it's a hard road and you have to go and do a retake, does it really matter if you want to become that dentist, if you want to become the nurse? Does it matter if you take another year to study? I'm not saying sit back and don't revise right now, yeah? That's not what I'm saying. So otherwise your parents are going to think, what? You know, but I'm saying work the best that you can. Have a clean niyyah in the way that you work, okay? And hopefully that will help you to feel more relaxed, that it doesn't matter, it's in Allah's hands. If He wishes for me to retake, I will. But eventually I will achieve what I wanted to achieve. Does that make sense? Has anyone got any questions? No? Okay. So hopefully I am a representation of what anyone can be. You know, for somebody dyslexic and still struggling with dyslexia, still struggling in terms of, you know, writing things and understanding things. So I'm just checking the time. When is Salah time? We've got another, 15 minutes? Yeah? 20 minutes. Perfect. Okay. So I've given you my introduction. Now I'm going to ask you, who is calm when they're revising for their exams? You're calm. Excellent. What do you do? How do you remain calm? You think about your work, right? You don't think about the exam too much. You just take each thing that you're studying at a time. Okay, excellent. That's a good tip. So you guys aren't writing tips, right? You should, you know, because he's got some good tips here. Yeah, so only think about what you're studying at that point. That's a good plan. Okay. Anyone else that's calm before an exam? Go for it. Excellent. I don't need to be here, then you guys have got it covered. So you break down the task before the exam. Okay, how far before the exam do you break down the tasks? Weeks before. I would suggest months, but you don't have months now, right? How long have you got? A month? A bit more? How long have you got? 1 week. Whoa, 3 days. What are you doing here? Excellent. Okay. Well, that's not excellent, but we'll get there. We'll think of something. Yeah? Inshallah. Go for it. Yeah. Yours finished today and you're still here. Have you got another one? It's finished. Okay, but you'll have exams next year, right? So you're preparing well in advance. Well done, you. Excellent. Anyone else calm before their exam? Who's anxious before their exam? Okay, and how does it make you guys feel? You want to go for it?
Nervous. It's just a fear of failure, fear of disappointment maybe.
Disappointment, yeah. But this goes back to, if you do the niyyah for Allah, can you ever disappoint Allah? Could we disappoint Allah? When He has planned for us, could we disappoint Him? Obviously if we did bad deeds, but this is about an exam, right? So, yeah? So hopefully that will take that pain away, in terms of, at the end of the day, even more than our parents, even more than our teachers, we're doing this for the sake of Allah. So if He's not going to be disappointed and He has a plan for me, I have to be patient. That's the other thing. To wait and see what plan comes my way, which is what I had to do through my life. I really had to be patient until, alhamdulillah, things started to happen for me. So what else, how else do you think you wanted to say something?
I think I would probably say more stress than anxiety, but also I feel like I need that stress to be able to feel motivated to do the work. And
Perfect.
So it's almost catch-22 where I need the stress to be able to get things done, and if I'm not stressed then I can't motivate myself.
So you guys have literally, I don't even need to look at this because you guys have said it all. So exactly what you're saying is that you need to be stressed to motivate yourself. So tell me, what's the difference between stress and anxiety?
I think for me, stress kind of just makes me feel like, oh, I have loads to do, I need to get it done. And it's more practical. Whereas anxiety is I'm just worried about stuff, and that's not useful. it doesn't like translate as like useful energy.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And yourself, you wanted to? No? Okay, so if I told you that excitement and anxiety are very similar, there's very little difference between the two, what would you say? So if you were going towards the end of a cliff, yep, and you were going bungee jumping and you had all the straps on and you were ready to go, you'd have the same feelings, but you'd be happy with it. You'd have the same hormones pumping through your body, but you'd be fine with it because that's excitement, yeah? It's pushing you to go and do that extra mile. The difference is when you don't have any straps on and you go towards the edge, you've got the same hormones, but at the same time your body is telling you be careful. So it's pulling you back. Does that make sense? So the motivation that you spoke about is that same hormone that you have in excitement that you have in anxiety. Does that make sense? So you actually need an element of anxiety. I mean, nobody's going to be excited for their exam, right? I mean, anyone get excited for their exams? No? Okay, so that's fine. We're all fine. But if you're not going to get excited, you're still going to need a push, right? So that's where you get a level of anxiety. Now, the only time that anxiety becomes really detrimental is if it has an impact on your daily life. If you can't sleep well, you can't eat well, you can't look after yourself. Does that make sense? And have you noticed that when you have so much anxiety or so much stress, you can't actually retain any information? Has anyone noticed that? Or do we not get that worried? Then you guys are a great group and you've got it all under control and I shouldn't be here. No? Anyone notice that if you've got high levels of anxiety, if you're really worried, so the closer you get to the exam, you can't retain that information. Am I right? Yeah? So this is why we need to actually relax before the exam. So it sounds really funny. I had a friend that used to watch TV the night before the exam, and I'm sitting there still trying to revise. I'm like, what is wrong with you? How can you be watching TV? You've got an exam tomorrow. She's like, no, because I need to relax. Because when she gets into the exam, she doesn't want to be so overwhelmed that she's, I used to go blank, absolutely blank, because I was working till the last minute, and I kept doubting myself. So I'm trying to teach you guys some different techniques, which is why we're 3 days before the exam. Well, I don't think you'll get much TV time, but 10 minutes is okay. You could try 10 minutes. You need to look at things like socializing. So you need to be able to put in time within this month, once a week maybe, or, on the phone, or play a game or something that's going to actually allow your anxiety and your stress to calm down a little bit, right? You don't want to be constantly thinking about the exam because it will burn you out before the date of the exam, okay? Now, the thing is, when you give yourself a balance, you're more likely to take in more information because the anxiety levels go down, right? So playing the PlayStation, for example, a couple of times a week with your mates or whatever it may be. Obviously, don't do it for hours and hours, yeah? Give yourself about an hour or that's it. At least that will allow your body to relax for a bit, right? You're not kind of pumping lots of hormones in yourself and stressing yourself out. Another thing that you need to do every day is sit as a family and have a meal. Not to have your meal in your room and isolate yourself, because we're social beings, and so we need to be in an environment where we're with people, because when we're with people, we feel better. I mean, just walking into this room and seeing more people, how good do we feel, right? Like after being away from mosque for 2 years, coming back and just seeing people, forget talking to them, how much better did we feel? So we need to make sure that we do make time for other people and for our own family members. So eat together as a family. You actually find you'll eat much better as well when you eat together. You eat slowly. All of that makes a difference, because if we're eating really fast at our table, it's not very good for us. It's not going to help us to calm down, okay? So one of you was talking about how you prepare yourself before the exam, right? So when you're overwhelmed, you can't focus. So how can we manage overwhelm? So there's a way of doing it. It's called chunking up and chunking down, okay? So, for example, you've got lots. Let me give you an example about Smarties, okay? Smarties come in so many different colours, or M&Ms, whichever one. Okay, now you've got a whole bag of M&Ms and Smarties. Now to think about counting them is overwhelming. It's too much. The big bag, I'm talking about the really big bag, okay? It's too much to think about, right? There's no way that you can just look at it and calculate. So if you think of that as overwhelm, you can understand what I'm talking about. So what do you need to do? That's a big chunk. You need to break down that chunk into smaller chunks. So the most ideal way is to pick the colours, right? Some yellow, some blue, some green, some brown. I don't know what other colours. Does that make sense? And then you've got smaller chunks. You've chunked it down. Okay? Now, if you had a bag of M&Ms and they were all over the floor, that's already chunked down because they're one bits like all over the floor. Now, even to look at that is overwhelm. Does that make sense? Because there's too many of them. There's no way you can count them. They're not in smaller groups. So again, you chunk them up. You put all the blues together, all the greens together, all the yellows together, and that's chunking up. So if you were to put that in terms of your studies, okay, if you have a to-do list, it doesn't always work for everyone. A to-do list is very overwhelming. My to-do lists are very long. If I was to have a very long to-do list, I would get very overwhelmed, and I'm sure all the revision that you have to do, especially GCSE students, I think A-levels looks a bit better on the to-do list, I'm guessing, but GCSE, you've got a very long to-do list with what, 9 subjects, 10 subjects? Yeah, that's a lot. It's very overwhelming, and within those subjects, you've got other kind of sub-subjects, right? So like science, double science is actually 3 lots of science. It's not 2 sciences, right? So it is very overwhelming. So the best way to manage this is to chunk these into groups. Does that make sense? So your to-do list isn't so long. I think we've got, what, another 5 minutes? I don't know if that clock is correct. How long have we got before namaz? 10 minutes. Okay, so that is fine. Okay, perfect. Does that make sense? Can you, any of you give me an example after me explaining what chunking up and chunking down is, how you would do that? No? How could you possibly chunk up and chunk down? What's on your to-do list? So think about tomorrow. I'm sure you guys are all, you're definitely revising tomorrow. You don't have a choice. No?
So I reckon maybe like group by subject as like a chunking box, so that everything you have to do per task. I don't know, I'm not too sure.
Group by subject. Okay, so you're doing university, yeah? You're at uni.
Like sort of like subjects.
Sub-subject. So how would you group those up then?
So I'd go through like each of my modules and kind of like write out what I need to do for each module. And I think that would be, the chunking down is almost like each individual thing, and then the chunking up for me would be like each module. I don't know if that's like applied.
Yeah, no, that works. That works. So, for example, I'll give you another example. If I started a new job and the boss came to me and gave me a massive file on my desk and said, "There's all these policies, and I want you to read all this," and it's a massive file. It's overwhelming to look at. How am I going to get through that? So I have to open the file. I have to look at the different contents and try and kind of divide them up and say, I'll do this on Monday. I'll do this on Tuesday. I'll do 3 on Wednesday. They look smaller. I'll do 4 on Thursday. Does that make sense? Rather than, right, I'm going to start today and I'll finish by the end of the week. That's not going to help. You have to set yourself targets. And the reason for that is when you set yourself targets, you actually feel good when you achieve them. So it's not about punishing yourself the whole way through. Well, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to have to get through this. If you set yourself targets and you achieve those targets, you can give yourself a muffin or a chocolate. Or does that make sense? So you're rewarding yourself each time. And again, that helps to make you feel more balanced and take away the anxiety. Does that make sense? Yeah? Do you think that could help? Yeah? Okay. So let's look at what else you can do in terms of making yourself feel calm. And then later on, after namaz, we will talk about how we're going to actually tackle the study itself. Yeah? Okay. So what do you think we could do sitting at our desks with our legs folded exactly how you've done? What could work for us? What could we do in that position? So in between a session, you're taking a 5-minute break. What can you do?
Just like think about your life.
Talk about your life. Think about your life. That could be overwhelming, though. Depends what you're thinking about, right?
Just like distract
Or you could breathe. He's in the perfect position for breathing. Breathing techniques, meditation, yeah. I mean, meditation's not for everyone, but if you can, go for it, yes. But we all have to breathe, right? So we need to find ways of controlled breathing, and there's lots of apps out there that actually tell you which nostril to breathe through and which nostril to release from and all of that. So whichever one works for you, do try out some of the apps, yeah, because there's some good ones out there. Another thing that we tend to do most of the year, but when it comes to exams, we stop doing, and we should continue to do. You can do it outdoors, you can do it indoors. Yes, exercise, exactly. But when it comes to the exams, we kind of put that on the side and we think, nah, don't have time for that. I've got to sit at my desk from 8 o'clock in the morning or till about 3 o'clock in the night, you know, and we kind of just sit there and we don't move until food is given to us at our table and we have to get up for namaz, that's it, right? But exercise is something that you really need to continue. Maybe not to the same amount of time. Maybe just go in the garden and kick a football about twice a day. You know, play with your siblings. Go for a walk around the block. Today was a beautiful day. Yeah, go for a walk around the block. You can even listen to something on the way that's going to help you with your memory. And there's something I need to tell you about memory as well, which will really help. So exercise is very important, again, because it gives you that feel-good factor. It will help you to reduce the anxiety. You know, you won't feel so worn out and burnt out. And that's what we want to avoid, especially when you've got 3 days before the exam. You do not want to get burnt out now. Yeah? So make sure you try and get some exercise in. Eat well, drink well, eat with the family. Make sure you have lots of fluids. I mean, eat nuts as well if you can. I mean, my grandmother used to give me the 7 badams every day. Guys, you guys know about that, the 7 badams? Yeah, it didn't really do me much good, but I'm sure my body did well with it. So it didn't really help my brain. But generally, you know, that's all because it's good for you. It helps. Actually, they say that the walnut, it looks like a brain and it's meant to help you with the brain. So I'm not a dietitian, so I can't confirm that. But it just shows the nuts are good for you. It's a good protein, okay? So exercise, definitely, okay? Are you all agreeing to now do some level of exercise if you've dropped it? No? What kind of exercise could you do from home? Go for it. Yoga. Yeah. You can set up a club, yoga club. What else could you do? I think I'll hardly have to start yoga before exams. You've got a couple of weeks, okay? What else could you do? Sorry? Football. Yeah, football's easy. You could even play against the wall. I hate football against the wall, but anyway, with the windows and stuff, but still, okay. What else could you do? Bike. Bikes are good, yes. Just that feeling when you're on the bike, right? Kind of, it's like a feeling of freedom. I've escaped. Yeah, go downhill. Definitely. Okay? What else could you do? Exercise-wise?
Oh, this sounds really silly, but I used to skip with different ropes.
Yeah, you've got more than just your legs. You've got your arms, everything moving, which is excellent, which is why star jumps are the thing, right? Star jumps are really the thing. So when you're sitting down at your desk for so long, star jumps are excellent. So when I do training, I've got one particular training that I work with somebody, and he makes everyone do star jumps. I don't know if anyone's been involved in any of those trainings, clearly not, but he will literally get everyone up when they start to get a bit tired and make them do star jumps. So that's a good one. Your arms and your legs are moving, definitely. So even when you're walking, I know you're going to look like a fool, but move your arms like you're speed walking, you know, try and get as much movement in all your limbs as possible, okay? And even if you're really bored, just do a wall sit. Do a wall sit with your pad and paper if you have to. Does that make sense? So, you're stretching your muscles and there's circulation going. With circulation, you know, good oxygen, you've got all that. So make your body as optimum as you can for your mental health to be good. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, and we've already covered meeting and socializing, and I think it's a few minutes to namaz time, isn't it now? 3 more minutes. Oh, let's try and cram in a bit about memory. Okay, so let me tell you how memory is formed. Memory, and now think back to some of your memories to help you to understand what I'm saying. Memories are a time and a place and an emotion with it. So go back to all those photos or memories that you have from childhood. You were at a particular place and there was a load of emotions that came with it. Now, do you remember the memories of difficult times more than the memories of good times? Generally, I know sometimes we go through trauma, and obviously those are very strong emotions that we do need to work through. So if anyone has gone through trauma and they need some advice or some support, that I'm happy to help out wherever I can, okay? But on the whole, if we haven't gone through trauma, do we remember the happy times more or the sad times? Sorry? Happy times? Anyone else agree, happy times or sad times? Sometimes sad times. When they're really strong emotions, am I right? Yeah? Really strong emotions, they stick. So on the whole, we want to try and make more happy emotions, right? We don't want to put ourselves in a difficult situation where there's a lot more sad emotions. So even if we're feeling sad, what do? We would go for a cup of coffee to a coffee shop with a friend. That would make a happy emotion to help combat some of the sad emotions, right? And what happens there is you've got the tea or the coffee, which is warm. There's there's like a sensory element to that. Yeah, so there's elements of mindfulness, there's elements of senses, so you can hear people in the coffee shop, you can see a different environment, you can hold something warm, so you can touch something warm, you can taste something warm as well, and you can have sugar, you can have a cake with it. So all of those things kind of work together to form the memory. And that's what you need to do when you're studying to some extent, because what you don't want is to be in a state of anxiety all the time. It becomes a bit monotone. There's no mindfulness in a state of anxiety, is there? You're actually not in that state fully. Does that make sense? You're not fully with it in that state. Whereas if you're in a happy state, which is why I'm saying exercise, even if you're walking around the block, you could have recorded some of the big things that you're trying to revise, and you can listen to them. Or there's so many YouTube videos out there that can really help make you understand what you're learning. And so you can walk around the block while you're listening to that. Does that make sense? So if you are able to form some happy memories while you're learning, that will embed the memory of what you're learning. So it won't be cramming and memorizing like we said before. It will actually be learning and memory that will last a lot longer than just your exams. I think we're ready to break for namaz. Okay, all right, thank you. Shall I hand it over?
Okay, we'll just do adhan and then we'll continue with the talk. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, Ashhadu anna Aliyyun waliyullah, Ashhadu anna Aliyyun waliyullah. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala salah, hayya ala al-falah, hayya ala al-falah, hayya ala khayr al-amal, hayya ala khayr al-abal. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. Allah Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
Salawat. Feel better after the star jumps? Excellent. Okay. So tell me, what is your learning preferences? Does anyone have a particular way? Are you a visual learner, auditory? Now, there's no actually learning style. It doesn't mean that there's only one style to learn for each person, which is what I thought maybe being dyslexic was the case. But actually, I've learned that every style works. It's different styles at different times. So we tend to have a preference of a particular way because it's worked for us. But when we try all the styles, it embeds the knowledge that we have gained, if that makes sense. Yeah? So, any particular styles? Go for it. So, I'm going to, just for the sake of the mic, I'm going to repeat, yeah? So, you said videos and bright diagrams. So, you're a visual learner. Do you use a highlighter as well? Do you use it? Or do you just look at it? So you use your highlighter. And what do you highlight? Main words, main sentences? I end up highlighting half my pages, which doesn't really work. Everything. But does that help you to focus? Is that why? Yeah. So if you're like me then, seriously, you need to see my iPad and the highlights are done on here. I'll keep rubbing them out. Yeah, so exactly that the highlighter actually helps you to focus on what you're reading. So that's perfect. That's a visual learner. Anything else? Any other visual learners here? That go for it, yeah. Videos, yeah, YouTube videos and stuff. Khan Academy, right? I'm not getting paid for the advert, don't worry. Okay, how about auditory? Oh, you're a visual learner? What works for you? Okay, so I'm going to repeat that. You had extensive notes, then you had a summary page of every topic, and then?
And then from the summary pages, I would learn closer to the exam date.
Okay.
The extensive notes were sort of made during the lesson time.
So this is exactly what I used to do. By the time I got to the summary notes, before the exam, I'd do bullet points. Because they work as triggers, right? So when you look at those bullet points, it triggers you to the main notes, the first lot of notes that you did, am I right? It kind of takes you right back there. So actually what you've done is you haven't memorized it, you've learnt it because you've embedded that knowledge, you just need a trigger to help you to remember. So if ever in the future something about that comes along, you will still go back to the first lot of notes, am I right? So that just shows how well the information can embed using a style like that by taking, long notes to start with, reducing it, and then reducing it to the extent it becomes bullet points. So with a visual learner, another way that I used to do visual learning was to do doodles or drawing. So because I liked science a lot. So drawing, anatomy, drawing the heart, all the diagrams possible. Right now I'm doing neuroscience and learning about cell growth and all kinds of things. So I always, although most of it for us is reading, I always find a way to find diagrams I can pin up or, have on my photos that I'd look at every night or whatever it may be. Or even I would draw them into my notes and put them into my notes. So that's another way of visual learning, okay? So there is also people that like to read and write. So part of the visual learning was the reading and writing, right? So does anyone just like to pick up a book and just read and that they take the information in straight away? No? No. Okay. Anyone just like to write and as they're writing it helps? Yeah? How does it work?
I think just like, after you've read something and if you write down what you understand of it, then you can sort of see what you don't understand.
It helps you to evaluate. So what she said was when you are hearing something and you write it down, when you've written it down, you can see the gaps. You can evaluate whether you actually understood it, whether there's gaps in your understanding or not, and then you can go back and learn more. Somebody said yes here. Both of you. Oh.
When you try and write something in your own words, then you have to understand it, right? So then it's clear which parts you don't understand.
Exactly. So you said the same thing. When you write it in your own words, you can see the gaps that are there and where you need to learn more, which again enhances your knowledge because when you go back to learn more, you've now gained a more peripheral knowledge. Does that make sense? So it's not just exactly what was told to you, because I know at university at the moment, I don't remember my previous studies, but at university at the moment, whenever I'm studying, they give us the information that we need to learn, but that doesn't help you to understand what you're learning. Does that make sense? They only give you the basics, but to learn around it helps you to visualize or maybe form a story kind of thing, analogy around what you're learning. Does that help? Make sense? Yeah? Okay. And what's the last style? We haven't done kinesthetics, so those people that like to do yoga and football. You could be listening and playing football at the same time, and that could help you learn. Yep. So if you're somebody that finds it very difficult to sit for long periods of time, you know, you need to get out and then come straight back. Not to stay out for ages and forget that you've got exams, but actually come straight back and try and sit down and study. But there are things that you could do, like you could have your notes, the smaller notes, and walk around the block and read them at the same time. Okay? Or you can watch your Khan Academy while you're walking back and forth in the garden. Does that make sense? So there are things that you can do. Anyone think that I haven't covered a style of learning that they like or they prefer, or do they want to try something different? Because it doesn't mean you need to stick to these styles, right? So I've learnt that although I was a visual learner before and I liked listening, since the audiobooks have come out, I've realized actually I don't like listening to everything. There's only certain things I will listen to, but I'm happy to watch most things. Does that make sense? So, and I like writing notes as well. The only thing that I'm not is a kinesthetic learner. So you might find that some people, they're constantly fiddling with their pen while they're learning. Have you seen that? Or they're flicking at something, or they're fiddling with something while they're learning. Now that helps them to embed the knowledge, which is why things like fidget spinners came into the classroom, because you thought, it's a toy. Why would you bring a toy into the classroom? But for some people, for their mind to be able to absorb information, they need to be able to do something, either click the pen. Do you want to demonstrate clicking the pen? Yeah, you hear that, right? People are studying and they'll be clicking away, kind of. So that usually that's somebody that's a kinesthetic learner, and they kind of need to have that level of activity going on so that they can embed their knowledge, right? So there's no right or wrong way of learning. What I would say is it's about experimenting and trying different types of studies, okay? So now let's get to the basics as to how we're going to prepare ourselves to study, okay? So we already said you need a good amount of sleep, you need to be drinking and eating well, you need to be eating regular meals, good meals, make some smoothies. A smoothie that really worked for me to keep me awake when I was falling asleep, not caffeine. That always actually put me to sleep, caffeine, because I think I overdid it, is to have berry juice and put some spinach and carrots in there. And if you want to blob a bit of ice cream or something, you can do, okay? But think about it. You've got iron, you've got all these different vitamins, vitamin C that keeps your immune system going. And actually with a bit of orange juice and carrots, you've got more vitamin C. It tastes really good and it's nice and cold. So I spoke about sensory before, right? Making sure that you try and get a lot of sensory input, yeah? And having a cold smoothie and a hot tea, decaf, will be very helpful. Or unless somebody's making ukareli chai, then yeah, you're not going to pass that one, right? Are we getting ukareli chai today? No. Okay. So another thing that you can do sensory-wise is make sure you're in really comfy clothes. Okay? So you want something that's snuggly, not too warm that you're going to fall asleep. So wear layers, okay? So you can remove the layers and put the layers back on, okay? I know it sounds really basic, but we don't actually think about these things and how it can affect us whilst we're studying, okay? You need to make sure that you clear your desk of everything before you start. I know you might have books of biology and books of, I don't know, maths from before, okay? But you need to take that all off your desk and then start again. Does that make sense? Have a box somewhere away from your desk. Make sure it's completely clear. Even your pens, go back to the basic. One black pen, one red pen maybe, and a highlighter. Really basic. Don't put too much on your desk, okay? Because again, it feeds into the overwhelm. Like I told you, when the Smarties are on the floor, it becomes a sense of overwhelm. It's just too much to look at, yeah? So try and clear your desk so you don't feel as overwhelmed with what's on the desk, okay? Make sure that before you start studying, you have a piece of paper, blank piece of paper on the table. And you stop, this is something you do maybe twice a day, okay? So say you're going to start a batch of study in the morning and then one after lunch, okay? So you'd have a blank piece of paper and you would sit there and think about nothing. And tell me, what happens if I tell you think about nothing? You think about everything. Namaz is a complete example of that, right? You say Allahu Akbar and the kitchen sink even comes in your head. You know, everything does. Do I turn the gas off on the cooker, whatever it may be. So, go on. Football comes to your mind. Okay, so you've got to play football before you do this, so it's out of your system. Okay? You need to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and play till 9 o'clock, and then it's out of your system, right? It still comes in your mind. Okay, make sure there's no football posters around your room. Pull them all down. Okay, so what you can do though, okay, is write everything that comes in your mind. So if it's football, draw. I'm giving you 5 minutes, yeah? Only 5 minutes. You sit there and you draw and write everything that comes into your mind. Fold that piece of paper, put it under your table or on the side. And you say to yourself, I know all these things are important to me and they want attention, but they can't have it now. I will give myself a particular time, maybe just before lunch, maybe just before salah, okay? And I will look at these things and think about them, and then that's it. Does that make sense? So that way you've told your mind, I'm clearing out my mind. Just like you've physically cleared out your desk, you need to clear out your mind, okay? Okay. When you plan your studies, what you need to do is only study for 45 minutes at a go, maximum. Okay, so whatever topic you're studying, you need to chunk it down, like we said before, chunking up and chunking down. So you chunk it down so that it's 45 minutes worth of study, okay? And then you leave the room. You do not stay in that room. You go somewhere else, whether it's outside to kick a football, downstairs to have a cup of tea, go for a walk, whatever it may be. But your break will be 5 to 10 minutes at the most, okay? Try not to make it too long, because then it's hard to get back into the study again, right? Once you've taken too much of a break and you watch an episode of whatever you guys watch these days, sorry, I'm not really up with TV so much, but then you've kind of lost it. You don't feel like going back to study, right? So take a 45-minute session and then a 10-minute break in a different room and come back. Make sure that your room is also ventilated. So even though it's a bit cold outside, kind of put on more layers, but have the window open a bit so that you're getting fresh air, okay? You need a good amount of oxygen. You need fresh air to keep yourself alert, because we kind of doze off by the end of the 45 minutes and the brain stops working and you feel sluggish. You also need to drink lots of water, okay? So every 45 minutes, I'm sure you'll have to go to the bathroom. Yeah, that's 2-3 minutes out of your 10 minutes. Yeah, so account for that. So we're really accounting for time here, okay? And then give yourself a big break at the end of the day or in the middle of the day, okay? What else can we think of? I'm just trying to think what else I've done. We've gone quite far ahead, actually, so I'm doing really well. We've already talked about the star jumps and jogging on the spot, haven't we? And you've also demonstrated that. Go for it.
I think one big issue is
Procrastinating, but that's what the white paper's for. So you can write procrastinating at the top of the white paper. Give yourself 10 minutes or 5 minutes to procrastinate for the whole day. And when it comes back in your head, you've got to say, well, I've already procrastinated over you, so that's it now. Tomorrow we'll procrastinate again. Then you need to change position. But then you need to change position. Oh, should we have a session offline? I'll help you with that. Don't worry, we'll get through that. So what you could do, though, is if you know that you're going to need to change places, you're going to have to move out because you're procrastinating, what you need to do beforehand is while you're taking those bullet points, those notes that have gone down to bullet points, write them on stick-it notes, stick them around the house. Stick them in the bathroom, stick them on the sofa, stick them on the... Ask your parents first, right? Because if it's somebody like me, I'll be pulling them down. But try and stick them up everywhere you can so that when you are procrastinating, change position, leave the room, and you know which room will have the subject that you're doing. So the living room has got science, all the stick-it notes for science, okay? And so you go into the science room and you just go around and have a read and ask your mum or dad to move the stick-it notes around. So you're not looking at the same stick-it note, you know, on that same sofa every time. It's actually an element of surprise. That element of surprise actually embeds your knowledge, because we said good memories, excitement, it will embed the knowledge, okay? So those bullet points that you put on stick-it notes, you'll be able to remember by going round. And hopefully that time of procrastinating won't be relevant, because you're not having to make the effort to learn at that point. The learning is already there. You just have to read it. Does that make sense? Yeah? It's when you're having to do something that the procrastinating starts. Am I right? Yeah? Because you go, oh, where am I going to start? How am I going to start? Does that make sense? Yeah? So that's another way of embedding knowledge, okay? So we kind of have a routine. Do you guys agree? Yeah? You guys have a routine? You've got a timetable already. What time would you study until? Until? Maghrib. It's getting late, Maghrib now. You take a break for dinner before that, yeah? 5 o'clock. 5 to 6. Okay. So after 6 o'clock, what you want to do is kind of soft revision. Yeah? So you do the hard stuff in the morning. You know, the really difficult stuff when you're fresh and you've got up in the morning. Okay? Maybe don't eat breakfast straight away, because I'm trying this intermittent fasting, which is working really well after Ramadan, whereas before it was difficult, because obviously we're used to not eating. And actually, to some extent, up until 11 o'clock, I'm functioning quite well. As soon as I've had my breakfast, I get sluggish again. So maybe try and give yourself time in the morning when you're planning and possibly procrastinating to actually not have breakfast, and you might be a little bit more sharper. Try that way. It might work, okay? But you can drink water. You can drink hot water. Again, sensory, yeah? Try and bring that into the day. If you're feeling really overwhelmed, what would be good is to have like a retreat box, okay? So you could put in sachets of your favorite coffee or favorite tea, or you could put in your favorite blanket, or I don't know, a book that you normally like to read in your pastime, or something like that, or even your PlayStation remotes. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, that's your go-to box to get something out that's going to give you that release for a few minutes or 10, 15 minutes, and then you get back to study again. Does that make sense? What you want to do is keep finding ways to reward yourself. You don't want to just keep plowing on, because when you don't feel rewarded, you're not going to embed in any of that knowledge. Does that make sense? You're just going to feel that there's no hope, there's no way out of this, there's no end, it's just going to continue. Does that make sense? Yeah? I know we had some questions. I'm just going to pull up those questions before we finish, because I know we're running out of time. Anyone got any questions right now? Is that a thumb up for questions? No? You're more than welcome to make one up on the spot.
Let me think one. Let's say for my brother, who's doing his GCSEs.
Okay.
He gets very stressed very easily. So, and then how does he deal with that? He just sits there and gets stressed about it. And I say it's fine, relax, but he doesn't.
Any particular times, or as soon as he starts in the morning? Yeah, it's too much, yeah. So I would say get up and go have a shower or a bath. Yeah, because if you've you've done all the exercise in the day, okay, and at that point you're just feeling so tired, okay, and like I said, towards the end of the day, try and make it soft learning. So try and make it something where you're reading and highlighting maybe, or just listening. Sometimes listening is overwhelming, because when you're listening, it's not to your pace, it's to the pace of the person that's delivering that talk. Does that make sense? So you're not in control of that information coming to you, and it can be overwhelming. So maybe for some people, listening in the evening is not right either. So maybe just reading, because reading is at your pace and you can go back and read again. And does that make sense? Yeah? So try and make the study towards the end of the day, I'll come back to you, as soft as possible, and make your evening relaxed. So go and have a bath, come back and set yourself a target of what you're going to do when you've come back from your bath or shower. Yeah? And if you need to go, I mean, right now it's nice and warm. You can go in the garden and go for a walk. Don't know how long it'll last, but, you know, hopefully if it's not pouring down. But again, there's sensory in you know, the rain. You know, you can go out in the rain and try and learn something, and you'll remember that time that you went out in the rain. You remember that for like 10 years at least. Yeah? Or in the morning, when, if you're an early riser, when there's kind of dew on the ground, it's still cold and moist on the ground, go barefoot on the grass. Walk about and read something or listen to something. It will embed. You know why? Because it's using your senses. It's not just sitting in one place, which is why you need stick-it notes of different colors and things like that, because it's all sensory. Does that make sense? Yeah? Any more questions? You can go cold, definitely. So when you have a hot shower, sports people will know this, obviously. When you have a hot shower, you're going to feel tired towards the end because it relaxes your muscles. So you do want to relax yourself first. But if you know you've got something to do, you don't want to be too relaxed. Turn the shower cold and then come out, because that will wake you up. It will give you the shock. A bit like what I was saying about tell your mum and dad to move the stick-it notes around. You know, when you've put them around to learn, the shock of not seeing it, you're not going to be in absolute shock, but internally you'll have some level of, oh wow, it's a different one now, you know, or they changed it. And as you do that, oh wow, that's going to help you to embed that knowledge. Yeah? So yeah, definitely try and do a mix of hot and cold. You could change it throughout the shower if you really want, but that's up to you. Okay, so some of the questions that I had, how much revision should be done and if it's enough. Now, you're never going to know if it's enough because you're still going to feel that anxiety towards the end, okay? But I think if you are writing notes and you're minimizing the notes and you get to the point of bullet points, you would know that you've covered everything. Does that make sense? Some of us like past papers and we kind of do past papers right to the end. But to some extent, doing past papers to the end will increase your anxiety. Because when you see how many you've got wrong, do you really want to do the test the next day? Seriously? No, because you're just going to have in your head, I'm going to fail anyway, what is the point? So try not to do past papers towards the end. Maybe up to 2 weeks before the end, that's it. And then, you know, move to a different way of studying. So once you've got those bullet points, you know that you've covered everything that you needed to cover. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. We've already covered how to manage the stress. Anger. Anyone feel angry? Anyone feel angry? I don't think anyone's going to own up to say that they feel angry. Now, what could... If you don't, frustration. Yeah, okay. So that's a bit like the anxiety, right, that we've talked about, where it kind of you get the sense of overwhelm. But again, if it's overwhelming, you are not going to be able to learn a thing. So get up, move away from there. Do not entertain it. Find something else. Go watch TV, go for a walk, go for a drive and get a milkshake and come back. Again, that's sensory. Yeah? Okay? Time management. We've covered time management. Hopefully you guys can fit in. If it's 45 minutes a session and you're studying from 9 till namaz time, for example, how many sessions can you get in? Who's doing maths GCSE? Somebody said they were. With a 15-minute break at the most. So it'll be easier. Now you can do a whole hour. How many hours? How many hours can you get in between 9 and 1? Oh, you've got exams though, right? Maths. I'm bad at maths. 9, 10, 11, 12, 1. You can get 4 hours in. So you get 4 45-minute sessions and 4 15-minute breaks. 3, 10, 11, 12, 1. Till 1. 4. Okay. You're testing me now, aren't you? Okay, we've covered it. 4. Okay. So you get 4 sessions in. And hopefully you can get another 4 sessions after namaz, before dinner. Because some people at 5, some people at 6, right? Does that make sense? I think that's quite a bit for the day, don't you think? Yeah? If you really work to the timetable, you would have good focus for those 45 minutes. But if you're sitting there for 2-3 hours, your focus will not be that strong. And change the subject. Yep, don't do the same topic after the break. Make sure you choose a different topic. And this needs to be planned at the beginning of the day, before your procrastinating session, and before your I'm going to have nothing in my head session. Yeah? Plan it out before that. So at least you've got everything down. Yeah? Okay, so we've covered that. What else is there? Time management, expectations from teachers and peers. We've covered that. So any more questions?
How do you deal with like distraction from mobile phone?
Well, we said clear the desk, right? So that turn it on silent, put it away, give it to your mum, tell her give it to me afterwards. But that could be your time for socializing afterwards. So you can go mad on social media for an hour afterwards when you have your social time. Go for it.
What's the best way to stick to the 15 minutes, like break time limit?
Set yourself a timer.
I think it takes time, like after a break, to go straight back into it. Like,
It does, but if you bring your hot cup of tea or coffee, again, use sensory, because that will calm you down into the next state, which is why I said when we're stressed out or whatever, we go to the coffee shop or somewhere, yeah? Because we need that sensory input to help us to focus on either a conversation or whatever it may be. Okay, any meetings? Who has meetings without tea? It doesn't happen. Or a drink. What do you guys have when you have a meeting? Pizza. Water. You're so good. Water's also sensory though. Yeah. You can have cold water. You like warm water. Tap water. Lukewarm water. It might be good for your senses. There you go. Does that make sense? So if you're going to bring sensory into it, you can slowly, and before you're, you can always have study starters, as it were. Write a load of questions. So there are apps out there. I did find a few. I can send it. I don't know if you've got everyone's email addresses of people that have signed up. Maybe I could send, but if you do a search right now or even later on quiz apps, there's loads of quiz apps. So as you're studying, so it's any quiz app, but it can work in terms of putting your revision together. So you could do different quizzes. You could do one on science, one on maths, one on, I don't know, English, whatever it may be. So before you sit down for that subject, you can always do some of the quizzes that you've pre-entered before whilst you were doing the initial learning. Does that make sense? So at least that gets you back into the fast approach of learning what you've kind of trying to consolidate. And it's a good way of consolidating information.
just to add on that, would you recommend, like, so I know for Quizlet, people have already made quizzes for like edX on maths or something.
Oh, okay.
So you can just use that. Would you recommend that or make your own?
I have not used it, so I only know that I found one that can help me for my neuroscience. I don't think there's anything out there for neuroscience, but I'll have a look. So what you were saying, just for the sake of the people that are watching, is that there are already quizzes out there at Excel, you said? For all of them. For all the okay, right, okay. So there's already quizzes out there for the GCSEs that you might be doing, so just do a search for that. And is that through the app stores?
Yeah, Quizlet.
Quizlet. Quizlet, okay. Good stuff, so we've got something, go for it.
How effective would you say work, like revising with other people?
Yes, so if you are somebody that's an auditory learner, it can be helpful, and like I said, it's a preference. It's not a way that you have to learn or that works for you. You can keep changing the styles, okay? So actually, it can be helpful to teach somebody as well. So if you've got a younger sibling or an older sibling, you could just pretend to be the teacher and have a whiteboard and actually teach the topic. It might sound funny and it might be a laugh, but again, you're building memories, right? While you draw on the board a diagram of whatever it may be, you've already built a memory of you and your sibling or your parent or whatever it may be. Does that make sense? And as you speak, you're hearing at the same time. Again, you're using two senses. Does that make sense? So you're not only saying what's in your mind, you're listening to the words that have come out of your mouth. So you've double learned, and then you've used the visual, the board or whatever it may be to teach. So that's 3 lots of learning in one. So what happens is, I'll give you a bit of neuroscience before we finish. You know a bit of neuroscience. There's something called action potentials, Hebb's learning, okay, Hebb's plasticity, something called Hebb's plasticity. I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's very, very conk, isn't it? Yeah, and I'm sure you'll all fall asleep. But there's something called action potential, and that is, in some ways, two neurons, kind of one hitting against another and trying to pass information, okay? Now, sometimes when we think we don't understand something, and I've experimented this with my neuroscience because it's very hard to learn and I didn't understand a word. And it took me 4 weeks to understand what I was actually being asked to learn. I tried and my head would hurt. You know, we say I've been learning till my head actually hurts. I actually could, it seems like I could feel the neurons hitting against the other neuron passing information because my head was hurting so much. But it never embedded. But by the 4th week, what happens is the action potential actually releases, which means that there is a link for the information, for the signals to go through in the brain, okay? Neural pathways, you might have heard, okay? So a neural pathway is formed at the most simplistic way of explaining it. Once that's formed, the knowledge is going to start to embed. So it might be that you're sitting there repeating, and it's become, you just think, I'm not understanding any of this. If you remain calm, there will be an action potential and you will embed that knowledge. Yep, test of patience. Any more questions? No? So we done? Should we recite it loud? So you got a question? No? All right. Should we recite aloud salawat? Muhammad.
Hello everyone. 1 second. Just want to thank you all for coming here today, spending your evenings when many of us would be wanting to celebrate this evening with our families after Eid, after Ramadan. Really nice to see the crowd also be interactive with the speaker. Thank you all once again, and salawat for the speaker.